Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. This video was inspired because I recently decided I would like to start learning some Old English. I have absolutely loved, been totally passionate about like linguistics, philology, and world languages since my freshman year of high school in 1994. So like almost 31 years now, and I figured like what better place to go than the oldest known surviving book in the English language. And this is particularly personal to me because it was written by one of my own ancestors, one of my favorite ancestors, one of the people I am most proudest to be a direct descendant of, King Alfred the Great of England, who reigned from 871 until 899. We're not exactly sure of his birth date or even his birth year. It was probably sometime between like 846, 47 and 849 thereabouts. And this is just like a really special thing to me. You know, when you're learning a language, it's important to like start with something that's personally meaningful to you. And like what better way to do it than having my own ancestor as a teacher. And this is a preface to the translation of not Pope Gregory I, Pastoral Care or Pastoralis in Latin. Alfred translated a lot of books from Latin into English. He was a man of letters. I really believe I get my own love of like, reading and writing and language and learning and knowledge and wisdom from him. We don't always only get our physical characteristics from our ancestors. Many times we also end up inheriting our passions, our interests, our hobbies, our personalities from them as well. I'm not going to attempt to read it in Old English because like I'm just like very early in my learning journey. I'm probably not going to like pronounce all the like vowels correctly, but I did, spend like 2 days like copying it out. This was really laborious because I almost never, I never ever do nearly this much printing at one go. I always do, like cursive, like I did the translation, but there was no choice because, there are a couple of letters in Old English that you can't really like do in cursive. Like, for example, the eth letter, this like, it looks like a D slanting down with the slash through it, and the conjoined A and E, like that, you can't really duplicate that in cursive. So unfortunately I had to print. And also I never make my print E's and G's the way I do here, but I felt like why not be authentic to the way Alfred probably would have written them. And like one of the things Alfred is like most remembered for, after of course in 878 he kicked the Vikings out of England, way to go great grandpa. So that's like the second thing he is most remembered for is like stressing like education, like putting up schools all across like England. And he really wanted people to like learn to love and appreciate like literature and books just as much as he did, particularly because his parents they really did like, neglect his education. He didn't know how to read or write until he was like 12 years old, and the people kind of like dragged at them like, what are you doing? You're not teaching all of your kids to read and write. And particularly Alfred is like one of the great, underdogs, the dark horses of history. Another reason I love him, he was not the heir to the throne. He wasn't even the spare. He was the youngest of 6 children, 5 of whom were boys. So he's like the baby of the family and the 5th of 5 boys. Like whoever expects the youngest boy to like come to the throne? But sometimes history works out like that. And of course many of the sentiments he uses there, he was writing over 1,000 years ago. The book was written in the original book he translated was written about 590, and he translated it into English. He was writing in Old West Saxon, which is an older form of Old English than Beowulf. So a little bit ancient lineage. So, but it is the oldest known surviving book in the English language. There are some like poems and such that are older, verified, but those aren't like entire books. And so anyway, he expresses himself in ways that might seem a little bit more like formal and just like long-winded sentences and things like that. But I really do feel his sentiments, they really ring true to the modern era. Like if you love books and writing, if you're on booktube and authortube like I am, you're going to really like relate to what he's saying, even if of course you would probably express yourself or like think about it a lot differently than he did, writing in the very late 9th century. And of course it should go without saying, because he lived like over 1,000 years ago, he's going to be using like androcentric language, like male like pronouns and language as a so-called default, like men should do this instead of people. And of course, he is translating like a book like Pastoral Care. The clue is in the title, but he does use like, Christocentric language, presuming like his audience is all going to be Christian. But, look past that, the universal message he's saying, which like really resonates across the centuries and the millennia. Just, books and reading are awesome and they're very important. Knowledge is power. And so I'm just, going to read the modern English translation. I took the liberty of translating the translation I found into contemporary English. So like none of that like thee and thou and shalt and art and nonsense. I hate that old style of translation. King Alfred greets Bishop Warforth with his words lovingly and with friendship. And I let it be known to you that it has very often come into my mind what wise men there formerly were throughout England, both of sacred and secular orders, and how happy times there were then throughout England, and how the kings who had power over the nation in those days obeyed God and his ministers, and they preserved peace, morality, and order at home, and at the same time enlarged their territory abroad, and how they prospered both with war and with wisdom, and also the sacred orders, how zealous they were, both in teaching and learning, and in all the services they owed to God, and how foreigners came to this land in search of wisdom and instruction, and how we should now have to get them from abroad if we were to have them. So general was its decay in England that there were very few on this side of the Humber who could understand their rituals in English or translate a letter from Latin into English, and I do believe there were not many beyond the Humber. There were so few of them that I cannot remember a single one south of the Thames when I came to the throne. Thanks be to God Almighty that we have any teachers amongst us now. And therefore I command you to do as I believe you are willing to disengage yourself from worldly matters as often as you can, that you may apply the wisdom which God has given you wherever you can. Consider what punishments would come upon us on account of this world if we neither loved it ourselves nor suffered other men to obtain it. We should love the name only of Christian and very few of the virtues. When I considered all this, I remembered also how I saw, before it had been all ravaged and burnt, how the churches throughout the whole of England stood filled with treasures and books, and there was also a great multitude of God's servants, but they had very little knowledge of the books, for they could not understand anything of them, because they were not written in their own language, as if they had said, Our forefathers who formerly held these places loved wisdom, and through it they obtained wealth and bequeathed it to us. In this we can still see their tracks, but we cannot follow them, and therefore we have lost both the wealth and the wisdom, because we would not incline our hearts after their example. When I remembered all this, I wondered extremely that the good and wise men, who were formerly all over England and had perfectly learnt all the books, did not wish to translate them into their own language. But again I soon answered myself and said, they did not think that men would ever be so careless, and that learning would so decay. Through that desire they abstained from it, and they wished that the wisdom in this land might increase with our knowledge of languages. Then I remembered how the law, he's talking about the Bible, was first known in Hebrew, and again, when the Greeks had learnt it, they translated the whole of it into their own language, and all other books besides. And again the Romans, when they had learnt it, they translated the whole of it through learned interpreters into their own language, and also all other Christian nations translated a part of them into their own language. Therefore it seems better to me, if you think so, for us also to translate some books which are most needful for all men to know into the language which we can all understand, and to bring to pass, as we very easily can with God's help, if we have tranquillity enough, that all the youth now in England of free men, who are rich enough to be able to devote themselves to it, be set to learn as long as they are not fit for any other occupation, until that they are well able to read English writing, and let those be afterwards taught more in the Latin language who are to continue learning and be promoted to a higher rank. When I remembered how the knowledge of Latin had formerly decayed throughout England, and yet many could read English writing, I began, among other various and manifold troubles of this kingdom, to translate into English the book which is called in Latin Pastoralis, and in English Shepherd's Book, sometimes word by word, and sometimes according to the sense, as I had learnt it from Plegmund, my archbishop, and Acer, my bishop, and Grimbold, my mass priest, and John, my mass priest. And when I had learnt it, as I could best understand it, and as I could most clearly interpret it, I translated into English, and I will send a copy to every bishopric in my kingdom, and on each there is a clasp worth 50 mancus, that's a form of currency. And I command in God's name that no man take the clasp from the book, or the book from the minster. A minster is a large or important church with cathedral status in northern England, part of a monastery. It is uncertain how long there may be such learned bishops as now. Thanks be to God, there are nearly everywhere. Therefore I wish them always to remain in their place, unless the bishop wish to take them with him, or they be lent out anywhere, or anyone makes a copy from them. So let me know down in the comments what you thought of King Alfred the Great's words. Did you personally relate to them? What do you think is the most important thing about books and reading? Do you have any feel a personal connection to any older relatives or ancestors who had the same love of reading and writing and just knowledge and learning as you did? Do you feel like I do and Alfred did, of course, that learning is power? When you read, you become full of wisdom and knowledge, and you pass that on to other people, and just you help the entirety of society, because an educated population is an informed population. They help to just move society forward, progressive social reforms. He had a reputation. He was a very kind person, very intelligent, thoughtful. It's too bad he didn't live longer, because who knows what more schools he could have founded. I'm so proud he is my ancestor. So thanks very much for watching all the way through to the end, and I will see you guys again very soon. Bye.